Judge warns, Diddy could be removed from courtroom for nodding at jury. When a defense team understands the appeals process well, they know that if their client is convicted, any actions the judge prohibited, like interacting with the jury, could become grounds for appeal. But there's also just plain common sense involved. Imagine being accused of a serious crime. Naturally, jurors are going to glance at the defendant for any kind of human reaction. If they see nothing, they might subconsciously form negative assumptions. It's only human for someone in that position to react, to nod, shake their head, show emotion. But this judge is keeping a tight grip on every part of the trial, including the attorneys and the defendant himself. In a moment that caught everyone off guard, Sean "Diddy" Combs, who had been sitting quietly and stoically throughout the trial, was warned that if he kept nodding at the jury during testimony, seemingly trying to influence them, he might be removed from the courtroom entirely. That's a serious possibility, and it raises a big question. If Diddy is removed, does that hurt his defense? It could, very much so. Jurors might start wondering why the defendant isn't there. Sure, the judge could give them a formal explanation, known as a curative instruction, but the judge himself said today, "You don't want to hear the instruction I'd give that jury." That comment made many in the courtroom uneasy. Just before a scheduled break, people were getting up to leave, but I stayed back. I wanted to hear the arguments, and I was stunned when I heard the judge say, essentially, "Let me put this on the record. If the defendant isn't in the room, especially in a trial of this magnitude, the jury may start to draw their own conclusions." No defense lawyer wants the jury imagining why their client is absent. That can be damaging, even if they're told not to speculate. So, for those just joining this developing story, Diddy was just sternly warned by the judge that if he continues making faces or nodding at the jury, he could be kicked out of the courtroom. And that's no small thing. Looking ahead, today's testimony will include statements from an accuser referred to only as Jane. This is important. There are 5 felony charges Diddy is facing, and if convicted, he could spend the rest of his life in prison. So, every witness matters. RICO cases like this are notoriously complex. Jurors are expected to connect a web of evidence, and prosecutors will try to tie everything together in their closing arguments weeks from now. This trial could last 8 to 10 weeks. Today's witness will likely add to the pattern prosecutors are trying to establish, to support earlier testimony and reinforce allegations. But now there's another layer. Diddy himself has to be extremely careful about his demeanor. As one might say to a misbehaving kid, "Fix your face." He's not a kid. He's a man facing serious charges. And even the smallest facial expression could have consequences. Laura Coates reporting live from outside the courtroom in New York. Thank you for that update. We're also joined by defense attorney Misty Maris, who is outside the courthouse where this happened. Misty, how big of a deal is this warning from the judge? It's very serious, she said. Removing a defendant from the courtroom is one of the most extreme steps a judge can take. There's actually a federal rule about this. If a defendant is being disruptive, even after being warned, the court can remove them. And that's what we're seeing here. The judge reminded the defense team that this kind of conduct was unacceptable, and that he'd already made that clear. Why is this such a major deal? Because every defendant has the constitutional right to face their accusers in court. That's fundamental. So removing someone is a last resort, but it's one the judge is clearly considering. This isn't about a defendant passing notes or looking engaged. This is about interacting with the jury, which crosses a serious line. When Diddy nodded directly at jurors during testimony, the judge saw that as an attempt to sway or even intimidate them. That's what prompted the stern warning. If it happens again, the next step could be removal, which would be a huge blow to the defense. As a defense lawyer, how damaging is it when your client isn't in the courtroom? It's massive, Misty said. First of all, if the judge removes your client, that instantly becomes an appellate issue. That's going to be something the defense can raise on appeal. But more immediately, it's about optics. Jurors will absolutely notice if the defendant isn't there. They won't be told why, and that mystery alone could hurt the defense. When the charges are this serious, any little thing that tilts perception matters. An empty seat at the defense table could say more than words ever could. So yes, it's a very serious situation, and you can bet the defense team is having a very blunt conversation behind closed doors to make sure this doesn't happen again.